What happens when the children you sacrificed everything for turn into strangers who only see you as a bank account? I'm Margaret Chen, and this is the story of how I gave my children the world, only to watch them throw it back in my face. But what they didn't expect was that their 68-year-old mother still had one final move left to play, and when I made it, everything changed forever. My story begins 35 years ago in a small apartment in Seattle, where my husband David and I raised 3 beautiful children, Marcus, Jennifer, and little Sophie. We weren't rich, but we were happy. David worked double shifts at the docks while I cleaned houses during the day and took in sewing. At night, every dollar we earned went into one thing, giving our children opportunities we never had. I remember Marcus's 10th birthday like it was yesterday. We couldn't afford the bicycle he wanted, so David spent 3 months rebuilding an old one he found at a yard sale. The look on Marcus's face when he saw that shiny red bike. That's what made every sacrifice worth it. Jennifer was our academic star. She'd spend hours with her nose in books while I'd sit beside her, helping with homework even though I'd only finished high school myself. Sophie, our youngest, was pure sunshine, always singing, always dancing, always dreaming of becoming a performer. David and I made a pact the day Marcus was born. Our children would go to college, they would have professions, they would never know the struggle of choosing between paying rent or buying groceries. So we worked. God, how we worked. I took on extra cleaning jobs, David picked up weekend shifts. We drove a car that broke down more than it ran. Our furniture came from thrift stores. We never took vacations, never ate at restaurants, never bought new clothes for ourselves. But our children, they had everything: piano lessons for Sophie, tutoring for Jennifer, basketball camp for Marcus. We paid for SAT prep courses, college application fees, and sent all 3 to good universities. The loans we took out were astronomical, but we told ourselves it was an investment in their future and in ours. We believed that once they were successful, they'd help us in our old age. That's what family does, right? When Marcus graduated with his business degree, I cried tears of joy. Jennifer became a lawyer and Sophie landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm in New York. David and I attended every graduation, bursting with pride. We'd done it. We'd broken the cycle of poverty. Our children were professionals with bright futures. Then, 10 years ago, David had his first heart attack. The medical bills started piling up. We'd never had health insurance, we couldn't afford it while paying for the kids' education. I called Marcus first. He was doing well in real estate, driving a BMW, living in a downtown condo. "Mom, things are really tight right now with the housing market," he said. "Can you give me a few months?" Those few months never came. Jennifer was saving for a down payment on a house. Sophie was paying off her credit cards, but their social media told different stories. Marcus posted photos from Cancun. Jennifer showed off her designer handbag collection. Sophie's Instagram was filled with expensive brunches and shopping sprees. David died 3 years ago, drowning in medical debt, having never taken that cruise to Alaska he'd always dreamed about. At his funeral, all 3 of our children showed up in designer clothes, crying crocodile tears. Marcus even had the audacity to ask if there was any life insurance money. There wasn't. We'd cashed out the policy years earlier to help with Sophie's emergency when she'd overspent in New York. After the funeral, I found myself alone in our tiny paid-off house, the only thing David and I had managed to keep. I was 65 years old, working part-time at a grocery store to survive, while my children lived in luxury. They'd call once a month, usually when they needed something. "Mom, can you watch the grandkids? Mom, can you lend me some money? Mom, can you send that old family recipe?" I always said yes, because that's what mothers do. We give and give and give, even when there's nothing left to give. But everything was about to change, because 3 months after David's death, I received a letter that would transform my life and teach my children a lesson they'd never forget. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, official and intimidating, with the logo of Patterson and Associates law firm embossed on the corner. My hands trembled as I opened it, fearing another collection notice or medical bill from David's final hospital stay. But as I read the words, my legs gave out, and I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. Dear Mrs. Chen, regarding the estate of your late uncle, Harold Fitzgerald, Uncle Harold, I hadn't seen him since I was a teenager. He was my mother's brother. A man who'd left our family after a bitter dispute before I was even married. He'd moved to Alaska, made a fortune in commercial fishing, and as far as I knew, had never married or had children. I'd assumed he was dead. We'd lost touch decades ago. But according to this letter, Harold had passed away 6 months earlier at the age of 89, and he'd left everything to me. His sole surviving relative. The number made me read the sentence 3 times for $1 million, plus a commercial fishing business, a property in Anchorage, and various investments. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, requested I call immediately to discuss the inheritance and the conditions attached to it. My first instinct was to call the kids. They'd be so excited. We could pay off all the debts, and there'd still be plenty for everyone. Marcus could expand his real estate business. Jennifer could finally take that partnership at her firm. Sophie could stop asking me for money every other week. But something stopped me. I sat there on the kitchen floor holding that letter, and for the first time in decades, I felt a spark of something I'd almost forgotten: anger. Pure, white-hot anger. I thought about David dying in a hospital bed, worrying about bills instead of reflecting on his life. I thought about the decades we'd spent sacrificing everything, only to watch our children enjoy the fruits of our labor while giving nothing back. I thought about how Marcus had forgotten to call on David's birthday the year before he died, how Jennifer had been too busy to visit during his final months, how Sophie had promised to come home for Christmas but cancelled at the last minute because she got invited to Aspen. For 3 days, I didn't call anyone, not my children, not the lawyer, not a soul. I just sat with this information, letting it settle, letting decades of suppressed feelings rise to the surface like oil on water. I looked around my small house with fresh eyes. The worn carpet we couldn't afford to replace, the ancient refrigerator that rattled all night, the heating system that barely worked. This was what David and I had. This was our reward for a lifetime of putting others first. On the 4th day, I called Mr. Patterson. His voice was kind but professional. Yes, the inheritance was real. Yes, it was substantial. And yes, there was a condition. Uncle Harold had specified in his will that the money should be used to secure my comfort and happiness in my fee null years in whatever manner I see fit. The lawyer explained that Harold had apparently followed my life from a distance, had known about my struggles, and wanted to make sure I was taken care of. He had no children of his own. Mr. Patterson explained he knew what it was like to be alone. He didn't want that for you. Tears streamed down my face, tears I'd been holding back since David's funeral. Uncle Harold, a man I barely remembered, had thought more about my well-being than my own children had. What do I need to do? I asked. Come to Anchorage, he said. Sign the papers, and then, Mrs. Chen, I suggest you start living for yourself. That night, I booked a flight to Alaska, but I didn't tell Marcus, Jennifer, or Sophie. Not yet, because for the first time in my life, I was going to make a decision that was entirely about me. And I had a feeling that once my children learned about this inheritance, their true colors would shine brighter than ever before. I needed to see them clearly before I decided what to do next. Alaska in September was breathtakingly beautiful. But I barely noticed the mountains and glaciers as Mr. Patterson drove me from the airport to his office. The inheritance was more complex than I'd imagined. Uncle Harold hadn't just left me money, he'd left me a thriving business with 12 boats, a processing facility, and loyal employees who'd worked for him for decades. Your uncle was tough but fair, Mr. Patterson explained as we reviewed documents. These people respected him. They're worried about what will happen now. I signed paper after paper, my hand cramping, my mind spinning. This wasn't just money, it was responsibility, legacy, decisions. The business manager, a weathered man named Tom Harrigan, came in to meet me. He was skeptical at first. This 68-year-old woman from Seattle who knew nothing about fishing, Mrs. Chen. He said carefully, "We can help you sell if that's what you want. The business is worth more intact, but we'd understand if I'm not selling." I heard myself say. The word surprised even me. Not yet. I need to understand what my uncle built first. I stayed in Alaska for 2 weeks, learning the business, meeting the crews, understanding the operations. For the first time in my adult life, people looked at me with respect, not as someone's mother or someone's wife, but as Margaret Chen, owner of Fitzgerald Fisheries. It was intoxicating. But I couldn't hide forever. On day 10, I finally called home. Jennifer answered first. "Mom, where have you been? I've been calling for 2 weeks. I needed you to watch Madison this weekend, but you weren't answering your phone. Not 'are you okay?' Not 'I was worried.' Just frustration that I hadn't been available to babysit. I've been in Alaska," I said simply. "Alaska, why? Is everything all right?" For a moment, I thought I heard concern. "I had some business to take care of." "Family business? Oh, pause. Well, when will you be back? Because I really need you next weekend. Robert and I have this couple's retreat we booked months ago, and the babysitter cancelled. And you know how important this is for our marriage." I took a deep breath. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something. Uncle Harold passed away and left me some money. I'm handling his estate." The line went silent. Then, "Uncle who?" "I don't remember an Uncle Harold. My mother's brother. You never met." "Yim. Oh, well, that's nice, Mom. How much are we talking about?" "We, not you. We, it's complicated." I said, "There's a business involved." "A business?" Her voice perked up. "Mom, you should sell it immediately. You don't know anything about business. I can have Robert's accountant look at it. He's excellent with this stuff. We'll make sure you get a fair price, and then we can invest it properly." Actually, Robert and I were just talking about buying a vacation property. "With your share and our savings, we could." "My share," I interrupted. "Well, yeah, Mom, I mean, obviously we'd all help you manage it. You know Marcus is great with real estate investments. And Sophie needs help getting out of her credit card debt. And Robert and I could really use." I hung up. My hand was shaking. Within an hour, my phone exploded. Marcus called, then Sophie, then Jennifer again, then group texts started flying. They'd clearly been talking among themselves. "Mom, Jennifer told us about the inheritance. Why didn't you say anything?" "Mom, we need to have a family meeting about this money." "Mom, I have some ideas about investments that could help all of us." Not one message asked about Harold. Not one asked how I was feeling. Not one acknowledged the decades David and I had struggled while they prospered. That night, sitting in Harold's my cabin overlooking the Alaskan wilderness, I made a decision. I would go home. I would face my children, but first I was going to test them. I needed to know, beyond any doubt, what kind of people my babies had become, and I needed to know if there was anything left worth saving in our relationship. I returned to Seattle with a plan, but my heart was heavy. I'd spent The flight home, looking through old photo albums on my phone, birthdays, graduations, holidays. Somewhere along the way, the smiling children in those pictures had transformed into the voices on the phone, demanding to know about their inheritance. I called a family meeting for Sunday dinner at my house. All 3 children arrived within minutes of each other, and for the first time in years, they were punctual. Marcus showed up in his Tesla, Jennifer in her Lexus, Sophie in a BMW she'd recently treated herself to. They kissed my cheeks, complimented the meatloaf I'd made their favorite from childhood, and made small talk until dessert. Then Marcus cleared his throat. So, Mom, about Uncle Harold's estate. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Yes, we've been talking, Jennifer said, pulling out a leather portfolio. And we've created a plan, a fair plan for everyone. A plan, I repeated. Sophie leaned forward, her eyes bright. Mom, we know you've been struggling since Dad died. We feel terrible about that. She didn't look terrible, she looked excited. So we want to make sure this money is managed properly so you never have to worry again. Marcus pulled out a spreadsheet on his iPad. Here's what we're thinking. The business should be sold immediately. Tom Harrigan already reached out to me. By the way, said you weren't returning his calls. I had been returning Tom's calls. We'd been discussing expansion plans. We've got a buyer lined up who'll pay $3.2 million for the business, Marcus continued. Below value, but it's cash, quick, no hassle. The property in Anchorage can be sold for about $800K. With the liquid assets, we're looking at roughly $4.5 million. Total, Jennifer took over, her lawyer voice crisp and confident. We split it 5 ways. That's $900K each. You get 1 share, Mom, and each of us gets 1 share. It's completely fair. I stared at them. 5 ways. Well, yeah, Sophie said, as if explaining to a child. There are 5 of us. You, me, Marcus, and Jennifer. That's 4, I said quietly. Right, but Jennifer and Robert are a unit. So, Robert isn't my child. Awkward silence. Jennifer's face flushed. Mom, Robert and I have been married for 12 years. He's family. And frankly, his financial expertise is the only reason we even have a solid plan here. I looked at Marcus. And what would you do with your share? His eyes lit up. There's this strip mall property downtown that's about to go into foreclosure. I could flip it in 6 months, double the investment. Then I'd cut you in for a percentage, Mom. See, everybody wins. And you, Jennifer, Robert, and I would buy the lake house. It's been our dream. Plus, Madison needs space to grow. The schools out there are exceptional. Sophie, my youngest daughter, bit her lip. I'd pay off my debts first. Then maybe take some time off work to figure out what I really want to do. I've been so stressed. Mom, I need to find myself. Find herself. With my money. I stood up slowly, my joints aching. Let me make sure I understand. Your father and I spent 35 years sacrificing everything so you could have education, opportunities, and good lives. We died broke so you could live rich. And now, when I receive an inheritance from my uncle, a man who was my blood, not yours, you want me to hand over 80% of it to you. Mom, that's not fair, Marcus said. We're family. Are we? The words came out sharper than I intended. Where was family when your father was dying and needed help with medical bills? Where was family when I was eating soup for dinner 3 nights a week, because that's all I could afford? Where was family every Christmas when I was alone? That's not fair, Jennifer stood up. We have lives, Mom, we have jobs and responsibilities and kids, and I don't. My voice cracked. I had you. That was my job, my responsibility, my life, and I did it perfectly. I gave you everything, and you gave me nothing back. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie's eyes welled with tears, calculated tears. I now realized, Mom, if you don't want to share the money, just say. But don't pretend you're some kind of martyr. You chose to make those sacrifices. That's when I knew. The test was over, and they'd failed spectacularly. The week after the disastrous family meeting, none of my children called. Not to apologize, not to check on me, nothing. But my phone buzzed constantly with text messages in a group chat they'd created without me. Jennifer had accidentally included my number, and they apparently didn't notice. She's being completely unreasonable. I knew she'd get weird about money. She's always been dramatic. Maybe if we give her some space, she'll realize she needs our help managing it. Dad would have wanted us to have that money. He'd be disappointed in her. That last message from Marcus broke something in me, using David's memory as a weapon. David, who'd worked himself to death for their futures. I screenshot everything. Then I called Mr. Patterson. I want to make some changes, I said, legal changes over the next 2 weeks. I worked with Patterson to restructure everything. The business would stay operational with Tom Harrigan as managing director, with profits funding a trust. The Anchorage property would be converted into affordable housing for fishing industry workers. The liquid assets would be divided, some for my living expenses, some for charitable foundations, and some for a very specific purpose that would teach my children exactly what they'd taken for granted. But first, I needed to show them something. I invited them to dinner again. This time at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind I'd never been able to afford. They came eagerly, probably thinking I'd come to my senses. I arrived wearing new clothes I'd bought without guilt, my hair professionally done for the first time in decades. "Mom, you look amazing," Sophie gushed. "Thank you," I said simply. We ordered expensive steaks, fine wine. When the bill came to $600, I paid without flinching. Their eyes widened. "So," Marcus said, leaning back, "have you thought about our proposal?" "I have," I said. "I've thought about it very carefully, and I've made my decision." They leaned forward, eager. "I'm keeping the business. I'm moving to Alaska." Jennifer's fork clattered to her plate. "What? Mom, you can't be serious. You don't know anything about running a business." "I've learned," I said calmly. "Tom has been teaching me. The crews respect me, and I'm good at it better than I expected. For the first time since your father died, I feel alive." "But what about us?" Sophie's voice rose. "What about Madison? And the grandkids? What about family?" I took a sip of wine, letting the question hang. "That's an interesting question, Sophie. What about family? When your father was dying, where was family? When I needed help, where was family?" "We've been through this," Marcus snapped. "We're busy. We have lives. So do I said. "And I'm choosing to live it, in Alaska. Alone. This is insane." Jennifer stood up. "You're being selfish and spiteful. This isn't the mother who raised us." "You're right," I said quietly. "The mother who raised you died in that tiny house, alone and broke, while her children lived in luxury. I'm someone new now. I'm Margaret Chen, business owner. And I make my own decisions." Find Marcus threw his napkin down. "Keep your money. We don't need it. We don't need you." He stormed out. Jennifer followed, shooting me a look of pure fury. Sophie lingered, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, please," she whispered. "Don't do this. We're sorry. We'll do better." For a moment, just a moment, I wavered. This was my baby girl, but then I remembered the text messages. Dad would have wanted us to have that money. "Sophie," I said gently, "I love you. I love all of you. But love isn't supposed to be one direction, and I've been giving for so long, I forgot what it feels like to receive, to matter. To be more than just a source of money and free labor." She left crying. I sat alone at that table, finished my wine, and felt something unexpected, peace. But my plan wasn't finished. Not by a long shot, because in 3 days they were going to receive letters from Mr. Patterson, and those letters would change everything one final time. Chapter 6. The Letters 700 Words 3 days later. Marcus, Jennifer, and Sophie each received certified letters from Patterson and Associates. I know because I'd arranged for them to arrive simultaneously at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. I imagined them signing for the packages, tearing them open with curiosity and dread. Inside each envelope was a financial document and a personal letter from me. The financial document was an itemized list, 35 years of expenses, every piano lesson, every college tuition payment, every car insurance bill, every emergency loan, every "can you help me this month, Mom?" Tallied up with dates and amounts. Marcus's total, $287,000, Jennifer's $312,000, Sophie's $294,000. The letter read, "My dear children, enclosed you will find an accounting of every dollar your father and I spent raising you, educating you, and supporting you into adulthood. This is not a bill. You owe me nothing financially. Consider it a mirror. When you demanded 80% of Uncle Harold's inheritance, claiming it was only fair, I wondered if you'd ever truly understood what fairness meant. Your father worked 2 jobs until his heart gave out. I cleaned strangers' toilets so you could have clean clothes and full bellies. We wore shame like a second skin, taking charity from churches at Christmas while you complained about not getting the right brand of sneakers. We did this gladly. Parenthood is sacrifice, but sacrifice flows both ways in a family, or it should. I've decided to give each of you exactly what you gave your father in his final years of life. Do you remember what that was? Let me refresh your memory, Marcus. You visited twice in his last year. You stayed for 40 minutes each time. You were too busy to help with medical bills, but not too busy to vacation in Cancun. Jennifer, you paid for 1 month of his medications, $200, and reminded us of it for years. You missed his last birthday because of a work conference that, according to your Instagram, included spa days and wine tastings. Sophie, you promised to come home for his final Christmas. You cancelled via text message 2 days before the holiday because your boyfriend got Aspen ski passes. I could forgive all of this if you'd shown even a shred of remorse. If you'd acknowledged your absence, your selfishness, your entitlement, but you didn't. Instead, you calculated how to take what was mine and justified it as your right. So here is my gift to you, 40 minutes of my time like Marcus gave his father, $200 like Jennifer's single gesture, and a cancelled visit like Sophie's broken promise. I am moving to Alaska. My phone number is changing. You will not have it. If you need to reach me, you may write to Mr. Patterson's office, and he will forward your letters. I will read them when, and if I choose, the inheritance is mine. I'm using it to live the life your father and I always dreamed about but never had. I'm traveling, I'm learning to fish, I'm making friends, I'm being someone other than Mom, a role you made clear is only valuable when you need something. This is not punishment. This is consequence. There is a difference. If, someday, you understand what you've done, truly understand, my door may open again. But you'll have to prove you've changed. Not with words, but with years of actions, the same years I gave you. I love you. I always will, but I'm done being used. Mom, my phone started ringing within hours. I didn't answer. The calls came constantly angry. Calls, desperate calls, crying voicemails. Jennifer left 11 messages in 1 hour. Marcus showed up at my house, but I was already in Alaska. Sophie sent a 50 text barrage swinging between rage and manipulation. You're a terrible mother. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You'll regret this when you're old and alone. I'll do anything. Just please talk to me. Tom watched me delete the voicemails without listening. That's hard, he said simply. It is, I agreed. But not as hard as watching my husband die while his children counted his life insurance money before he was even buried. Do you think they'll change? He asked. I looked out at the water, watching the boats come in with the day's catch. I don't know, I said honestly, but for the first time in my life, their choices are not my responsibility. Mine are. 6 months passed. Winter came to Alaska, harsh and beautiful. I learned to operate the business, spending days in the processing facility and nights reviewing accounts. The crews taught me about salmon runs and market prices. I taught them my mother's recipes. And we'd have dinners together, this makeshift family of grizzled fishermen and one stubborn old woman from Seattle. Tom became my closest friend, never judging, always steady. You're a natural, he'd say as I negotiated with buyers or solved crew disputes. I'd laugh, but inside, I felt something I hadn't in decades, pride in myself, not in my children's accomplishments, but in my own. I traveled too. I saw the northern lights from a cabin in the wilderness. I took a cruise through the Inside Passage, the kind of trip David had always wanted. I cried on that cruise, but they were clean tears, washing away years of resentment and regret. Back in Seattle, my children were spiraling. I knew this because Patricia, my former neighbor, kept me updated via mail. She didn't approve of what I'd done. They're your children, Margaret. But she was honest about what she observed. Jennifer's perfect life was cracking. Her marriage was strained. Without me as free child care, she'd had to cut back her hours at the firm, jeopardizing her partnership. She'd apparently hired 3 different babysitters, all of whom quit within weeks. Madison, my granddaughter, had started asking, "Where's Grandma? Why doesn't she love us anymore?" That one hurt. Marcus's real estate empire was struggling. He'd overextended himself, and without the capital injection he'd planned from my inheritance, he was facing foreclosure onto properties. His wife, Amy, had apparently started questioning his financial decisions. Patricia reported overhearing a massive fight through the walls of their condo. Sophie had lost her job. The details were unclear, but something about performance issues and too many personal calls during work hours. She'd moved back into her old apartment with 3 roommates, her BMW repossessed. She was WITRESSING. Part of me, the mother part that never dies, wanted to swoop in and save them. But I'd learned something in Alaska. Sometimes saving people prevents them from learning to save themselves. Then, for months after I'd sent the letters, something changed. An email arrived from Jennifer. Not a demand or manipulation. Just, "Mom, I'd like to write to you. May I?" No agenda. Just, "May I?" I stared at that email for 3 days before responding. Yes. Her letter arrived 2 weeks later. Handwritten. 8 pages. She didn't make excuses. She started with, "I don't know when I became this person." She detailed memories I'd forgotten, times I'd sacrificed, times she'd been cruel without realizing it, times she'd taken and never given back. She wrote about Madison asking why Grandma didn't love them, and how Jennifer had finally told her daughter the truth. "Grandma loves us. We're the ones who stopped loving her properly." She wrote about her marriage struggles, but not to ask for help, to acknowledge that she'd built her life on foundations of selfishness, and now those foundations were crumbling. "I'm not writing to ask you to come back," the letter concluded. "I'm writing to say I understand now. I understand what you and Dad gave us. I understand what we took. And I understand that you don't owe me forgiveness, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life becoming someone worthy of it, whether you ever see it or not, because you deserve to have raised better children than we became. I'm sorry it took losing you to figure that out." I cried reading that letter, real, body shaking, sobs. Then Marcus's letter came. Then Sophie's, different words, same awakening. They weren't asking me to fix their lives. They were telling me they were fixing themselves. Tom found me on the dock, letters in hand. Tears on my face. "Good news or bad news?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but it might be the beginning of something. What will you do? I looked at those letters. Evidence that maybe, just maybe, my children were finding their way back to being the people David and I had hoped they'd become. I'm going to wait, I said, and watch, and hope. A year after I'd sent my letters, I returned to Seattle, not to move back. Alaska was home now, but to visit. I told my children I was coming, giving them 2 weeks' notice. I insisted on meeting them one-on-one at neutral locations. With no expectations, Jennifer met me at a coffee shop downtown. She looked different, tired, but somehow lighter. Madison was with her, and my granddaughter ran to me with pure joy. That hug nearly broke my resolve. We talked, really talked. Jennifer showed me her life now, the scaled-back career, the smaller house they'd moved into, the family therapy they were attending. Robert and I almost divorced, she admitted. But we realized we'd built our marriage on the same toxic foundation I'd built my relationship with you on. We're rebuilding. It's hard, but it's real now. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask me to move back. She just asked, can I write to you? Can Madison know her grandmother again? Yes, I said, to both. Marcus met me at a park. He was jogging, something he'd never done before. Lost the Tesla, he said with a rueful smile. Driving a Honda Civic now. Turns out my ego couldn't run on unleaded gas. He'd declared bankruptcy, lost the properties, started over as a real estate agent working for someone else. I'm making maybe a third of what I used to make, he said, but I'm sleeping at night. And Amy respects me again. Funny how losing everything helped me find what actually mattered. He handed me something, a check for $500. It's not much, he said, but it's mine. I earned it. I'm paying you back, Mom. Not the whole amount, that would take decades. But I'm paying you back, $20 a week until I'm done, because you were right. I took everything and gave nothing. I tried to refuse the check. He insisted, let me do this, please. Let me be someone Dad would be proud of. I kept the check. Sophie was last. We met at the beach, walking along the shore. She looked younger somehow, despite working 2 jobs. I'm applying to community college, she said. Social work. I want to help people who are struggling like you struggled, like I'm struggling now. She told me about her tiny apartment, her second-hand clothes, her budget meals. For the first time in my life, Mom, I understand what you went through, and I'm so ashamed, but I'm also grateful. Is that weird? This year broke me down, but it's building me back up into someone better, she cried. I cried. We stood on that beach, holding each other, and it felt like meeting my daughter for the first time. Can I come visit you in Alaska? She asked. Not right away. When I've saved enough money, I want to see what you built. I want to understand who you are now. I'd like that, I said. I spent a week in Seattle. I met my grandchildren. I saw the changes my children had made, real, difficult, unglamorous changes. They weren't perfect. They still made mistakes, but they were trying. On my last night, they threw me a small dinner party. Nothing fancy, spaghetti and salad in Marcus's modest apartment. We looked at old photo albums, and for the first time in years, the memories didn't hurt. Do you forgive us? Sophie asked quietly. I thought about that question, about David, about sacrifice, about years of pain and recent months of healing. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't a light switch, it's a path. We're all walking it together now. Jennifer raised her glass of cheap wine. To Mom, she said, who loved us enough to let us fall, and who's giving us the chance to stand back up. To Dad too, Marcus added softly, who's probably up there shaking his head at how long it took us to get it. We toasted to David, to new beginnings, to hard lessons learned. I flew back to Alaska the next day. Tom picked me up from the airport. How'd it go? He asked. I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with peace. "They're going to be okay." I said, "We're all going to be okay." And for the first time since David died, I truly believed it. The end. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give those we love